Hello, all. Welcome to my channel. Today, we will be starting a three-part series on enzymes. Under this unit, we will be talking about the properties of enzymes, their nomenclature and classification, the different models of enzyme attachment, and we will be talking in detail about the different factors that affect the enzyme substrate binding. So, we will be talking about 4 to 5 factors and elaborating on enzyme inhibition. Followed by this, we will be studying more about the enzyme regulation and a small portion about what are ribozymes. This is how the three-part series will be divided. In today's video lecture, we will focus more upon the properties of the enzyme and the classification of the enzymes which is being followed worldwide. Let us look into it. So, when we look into the history of enzymes, the large amount of biochemical reactions which are present in all the living cells, in every living cell, in fact, is mediated by these, beautiful or remarkable biological catalysts which we call as enzymes. And though they are subject to the same laws of nature which are governing the other substances, they are differing from the chemical catalyst due to some important characteristics. We look into it. What are those characteristics? It was in the year 1835 that the scientist Jacob Berzelius he pointed out, or he told, that there is an extract of malt which he called as diastase, but now we call it as the amylase enzyme. He told that this extract of malt, which contains this particular diastase, can catalyze or can bring about the hydrolysis of starch into its monosaccharides. He did not specify or mention about monosaccharides, but it is able to catalyze the breakdown or hydrolysis of starch into smaller molecules at a rate that is much faster than the chemical version which was being used at that time, that is using sulfuric acid. So he was the first one to point out about this or to make a note about this. Then in the year 1878 we had the term enzyme being coined by the scientist William Cohen. He is the one who gave this terminology enzyme. So, like I just told you previously in the previous slide, they are biological catalysts, which means they are catalyzing or they are present as an important factor of every reaction in a biological cell. And like chemical catalysts, they are having several similarities the way they function, but the three major areas where they differ from chemical catalysts are what are listed over here. The first one is that the biological catalysts, or in other words, the enzymes, have very high reaction rates. So, unlike chemically catalyzed reactions, unlike chemically catalyzed processes, if or even an uncatalyzed process, if we see an enzymatically catalyzed reaction or a reaction where an enzyme is coming into play, such reactions have the reaction rate over there is very high. When I say high, it is as high as 10 to the power 6 to 10 to the power 12 times that of an uncatalyzed reaction. So the reaction rate is very high, and in fact much higher than that of a chemical reaction. Also, in comparison to chemicals or a chemically catalyzed reaction, the enzymes work at much milder reaction conditions. So if I want to catalyze a particular reaction with the help of an enzyme, the temperature is very mild. Usually it is below 100 degrees Celsius unless it is in a specific type of environment. Or even when we talk about the pressure, it is usually under the atmospheric pressure, and even the pH is usually neutral. But all of these reaction conditions are much easier to maintain when we talk about a biological catalyst than when we look into a chemical catalyst, which has very high temperatures they work at, or they you have to provide a lot of pressure over there if they have to start working. So, in comparison to that, enzymatically catalyzed reactions work at much milder reaction conditions. Also, they show a very high reaction specificity. So, the enzymes show much more degree of specificity in comparison to their chemical counterparts, wherein they will go and specifically bind to a substrate or a reactant and form the product in comparison to the chemical catalyst. So, these are some of the reasons why the after the introduction of biological catalysts or enzymes, they have become extremely popular in all the industries. Even till date, there are many industries that are extracting the biological catalysts or the enzymes, manufacturing those enzymes in large quantities and supplying them to other industries. So the enzymes are a very core unit of several industries. Now, I have been telling you about enzyme, I have been telling you about catalysis. Let us see what are some of the important terminologies that you need to know before we get into enzymology. So, the enzymes are substances which are produced by a living organism, that is, they are present in a biological cell, and they act as catalyst, which means they bring about a biochemical reaction, a specific biochemical reaction, by altering the rate of the reaction. Now, what exactly is the rate of the reaction? We will look into it a little later. The substances on which the enzymes act are known as the substrates, and on the substrates there are certain sites, there are certain regions, specific regions on the substrate, on the enzyme, to which the substrate comes and binds. So the specific region of the enzyme which combines with the substrate is known as the active site. As you can see here in this diagram or in this picture, the active site is this region which has been shown over here. This region is the one which binds to the substrate. So the active site of the enzyme is the region that is helping in binding of the substrate to the enzyme. Enzymology, as we know, is the study of enzymes, about their kinetics, their function, the structure, as well as the relation of one enzyme with the other. So that is called as the branch of chemistry that is called as enzymology. Now we have enzymes which perform similar functions, but they are different in their structure, or they are different in the way they are being regulated. So those enzymes which are performing the same function but are different in their molecular structure are called as isozymes. And a very classical example of isozymes is the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase, which has 5 isozymes. So there are 5 different types of lactate dehydrogenase structures in our body. Each one of them is having a different composition in it. The subunits are differently arranged, but they all perform the same role. So such enzymes which perform the same function but are different in their structure are called as isozymes. We then have zymogens, which are the enzyme precursors or the inactivated form of the enzyme. So a cell can release the zymogen, that is, it can release the inactivated form of the enzyme, which then gets activated at a particular condition to carry out its function. So zymogens are the enzyme precursors. They give rise to the final active enzyme. And then we have this terminology that is constitutive and adaptive enzymes. Adaptive enzymes are those which are synthesized at the time of the reaction. So they are being synthesized only when they are required, and then after that they'll get degraded. So those are called as adaptive enzymes. Whereas constitutive enzymes are those which are always present in the cell. So either an enzyme can be constitutive or it can be adaptive. Now moving on to their nomenclature. So initially, most of the enzymes now we see have the suffix ase that is added at the end. That is why it is called as a suffix. So the suffix ase is added to the name of a particular substrate or some other word or a phrase which is describing the activity of the enzyme. That is how enzymes are being named now. But earlier or in the initial period, the names were not so channelized. We did not have such a unique methodology to give the name. Instead, the naming was based on either the substrate name, like I just told you. So we could have urease, which was catalyzing the hydrolysis of urea. So the name of the substrate was taken and ASE was added to it. Or it was also based on their source. Suppose, for example, trypsin, which is from which means in Greek it means wear down or wearing down. So it was obtained by wearing down the pancreatic tissue with glycerin. That's the reason the name was given as trypsin. So it was just based on how we sourced it from the pancreatic tissue. We were rubbing it or we were wearing it down, and that is why the name of the enzyme was called as trypsin. Or we also have pepsin. Pepsin means digestion in Greek. So the name was given as, it was given, the name was given to signify an enzyme which is known to act in the digestion of foods. So the naming of the enzymes or the nomenclature of the enzymes earlier was very random, and it was either based on what it is where it is derived from or what it is doing, or just based on the name of the substrate, and an ASC suffix was getting added. But now as in from 1964, there has been a very systematic methodology for naming of enzymes. So we have a body called as the International Union of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, IUMB, that is International Union of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, which decides or which gives the names of the enzymes. So the IUPMB decides how enzymes have to be nomenclated, how they have to be named, and also how they have to be classified, under which class do they have to be put. So the enzymes are classified based on six classes. There are six classes of enzymes, and each of these six classes are having a particular role. This is what we will be looking into next. So based on what an enzyme does, what type of activity it has, based on that, the enzymes are divided into one of the six classes. In these six classes, there are several subclasses. Under the subclasses, we have subclasses and so on. So when we talk about the naming of the enzyme, when we talk about how they are being denoted, the denotion of the enzyme or the naming of the enzyme is usually given with EC, capital E and capital C, which denotes the enzyme commission that is giving the name. So we have EC followed by four numbers. These four numbers are representing different things. The first number represents the class of that particular enzyme. So does it belong to the first class, to the second class, third, fourth? We have six classes. So the first number after EC denotes the class of the enzyme. The second number denotes the subclass. The third number denotes the subclass, and the fourth number is the actual entry of the enzyme. So if I have an example I can give you is if I have an enzyme being denoted as EC 2.7.1.1, if this is the name of the enzyme, it is used to designate an enzyme which is in the second class of enzymes. And this particular example I have given you is for glucose phosphotransferase. So it belongs to the second class of enzymes. Under that, it belongs to the seventh subclass, first subclass, and the last digit is the enzyme itself. This is how we are naming and classifying the enzymes. So I told you there are six classes of enzymes. These classes have been fixed. So we know that if I tell you there is an enzyme which belongs to the sixth class, I know it has to be an isomerase. Or if I tell you that an enzyme is belonging to the first class of enzymes, it has to be an oxidoreductase. So the six classes of enzymes are fixed in their order. The first class of enzyme is oxidoreductases or oxidoreductase. This group involves, or this group includes enzymes which are involved in redox reactions, that is oxidation reduction reactions. So any enzyme, if it is even a new enzyme is being discovered, if it is involved in a redox reaction, plain and simply it is being put into the first class of enzymes, that is oxidoreductases. An example for this group of enzymes is lactate dehydrogenase. If you can see here, lactate dehydrogenase is catalyzing the conversion of pyruvate to lactate, or even the other way around. It can catalyze both forward and backward reactions. So here pyruvate is being converted into lactate. In this process, you have NADH being converted into NAD. So here what happens is NADH is getting oxidized. So we have oxidation of NADH and we have reduction of pyruvate into lactate. So there is reduction as well as oxidation happening, or in other words, it is catalyzing both the oxidation and reduction reaction, and hence this group of enzymes is called as oxidoreductase enzymes. These are enzymes which catalyze oxidation reduction reactions. The next group of enzymes are transferases, which catalyze the transfer of a functional group. So in the earlier example, when I say they are doing reduction and oxidation, it means there is transfer of electrons, or you can even say there is transfer of hydrogen. In the second group, that is transferases, it involves transfer of any other group apart from hydrogen. The moment I say hydrogen is being transferred, that will come under the group of oxidoreductases only, because oxidation and reduction can be defined in several methods. One is the transfer of electrons, the other one is the loss of hydrogen or gain of hydrogen. So the moment an enzyme is transferring hydrogen, it comes under oxidoreductases. But if it is transferring any other functional group apart from hydrogen, then we call it as a transferase group of enzymes. What are these functional groups? It could be a sulfur group, it could be an amino group, it could be a phosphate group. So an example for this is kinase enzyme. Whenever there is transfer of phosphate group involved, there will be a kinase. For example, here I have shown you the example of hexokinase. Hexokinase is involved in the transfer of phosphate group from ATP to a hexose sugar, for example, glucose. So from ATP, phosphate group is being transferred to a hexose sugar, and in this process you get hexose monophosphate. So in this example, it is glucose. Glucose is getting phosphorylated, or it is getting added with phosphate to form glucose 6 phosphate. So here the phosphate group is being transferred by the hexokinase enzyme, and hence it is coming under the second class of enzymes, that is transferases. The third class of enzymes are hydrolases. Hydrolases, like the name says, are involved in hydrolysis, or the breakdown of a substrate with the addition of water. Along with the use of water molecule, a substrate, when it gets broken down, that process is called as hydrolysis. And those enzymes which catalyze this hydrolysis are called as hydrolases. A good example for this are our digestive enzymes, for example, chymotrypsin or even urease. Urease catalyzes the breakdown of urea with the addition of water to give ammonia and carbon dioxide. So we have urea getting hydrolyzed or being broken down with the help of water to give ammonia and carbon dioxide. This is an example. Urease is an example of the third class of enzymes, that is hydrolases, which are breaking down molecules with the addition of water. Now, when we have the breakdown of molecules without the addition of water, or we are having removal of certain atoms or removal of certain groups from the substrate, but there is no involvement of water or there is no addition of water, such enzymes are grouped under the fourth class, that is lyases. So wherever the molecules are getting removed, or substrates from the substrate, there are groups of atoms being removed without the addition of water, such group of enzymes is called as lyases. An example for this is aldolase, which catalyzes the breakdown of fructose 1,6-bisphosphate to dihydroxyacetone phosphate and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. As you can see over here, this molecule is being broken down without the addition of any other molecule into 2 3-carbon compounds. So this is a 6-carbon compound. You are having the breakdown of that compound into 2 3-carbon compounds. One is a ketose, one is an aldose. Dihydroxyacetone phosphate is a ketose and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is an aldose. Now when we are having the breakdown of such a molecule, but there is no addition of water over here, as you can see, that type of enzyme comes under the fourth group of enzymes, that is lyases. The example over here is aldolase enzyme. The fifth group of enzymes is isomerases. So isomerases are involved in the rearrangement of atoms within a molecule. They do not take in anything, they do not release anything, there is no breakdown, there is no addition. Simply rearrangement of atoms when it happens, that is known as an isomerization process. And the enzymes which catalyze this are called as isomerases. So an example for this is triose phosphate isomerase, which catalyzes the interconversion of dihydroxyacetone phosphate to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The molecules I mentioned in the previous slide, these two molecules are isomers of each other, and their isomerization reaction or their interconversion is being brought about by the enzyme triose phosphate isomerase, which belongs to the sixth class of enzymes. The fifth class of enzymes. The last class of enzymes are the ligases. Ligases are those enzymes which are involved in the combining of two molecules or in the joining of two molecules with the expense of ATP. So there is usage of ATP and we are having combination of two molecules to form a new molecule. For example, we have amino acyl tRNA synthetase, or in this example I have shown you asparagine synthetase. Asparagine synthetase is combining aspartic acid and ammonia with the help of ATP to form asparagine. So we have asparagine, a new molecule being formed, new molecule being synthesized with the help of a ligase class of enzymes. So ligase enzymes are joining two molecules or even more molecules with the help of ATP to form a new molecule. Such enzymes are coming under the last group of enzymes or under the sixth group, that is ligases. So like I told you earlier, we have these 6 classes. They start with oxidoreductases, we have transferases. Both of these are involved in transfer, but oxidoreductase is involved only in the transfer of hydrogen or electrons, that is, in other words, oxidation reduction reactions, whereas transferases are involved in the transfer of any other functional group. Then we have the third and the fourth class of enzymes. Third class of enzymes is involved in the breakdown of a molecule with the addition of water, whereas the fourth class of enzymes, that is lyases, are involved in the breakdown of molecule without addition of water. The fifth class is isomerases, which are involved in isomerization reactions, and sixth class are enzymes which are involved in synthesis of a new molecule, that is ligases. Moving on to the properties of enzymes. So most of the enzymes are proteinaceous in nature, that is, they are made up of amino acids, and there are very few enzymes which are non-proteins. Examples are ribozymes, which we will be talking about later. They are also known to be colloidal in nature because of their large size. So due to their large size in comparison to the substrate on which they are acting, their size is much larger. So due to this, because of this large size, they exist in the solution as colloids or as hydrophilic colloids. So that is why they are having a colloidal nature. Enzymes are having a catalytic property, which means, when I say catalytic property, it means they cannot start a reaction, they can only accelerate the reaction, they can only increase the rate of the reaction by lowering the activation energy. So they are required in a very small amount, but they cannot initiate the catalysis, they can only accelerate, or they can increase the rate of the reaction. And after the reaction is completed, or at the end of the reaction, we get back our enzymes. So they are never used up in a reaction. The moment something gets used up in the reaction, you don't call it an enzyme, you call it as a substrate. It is being used up in the reaction. Whereas here, the enzyme may get used up intermediately or in an intermediate step, but at the end of the reaction, we get back our enzyme. So they have catalytic properties. There is something called as an enzyme efficiency or a turnover number of an enzyme. This is the number of substrate molecules which can be acted upon by the enzyme per unit time. So every enzyme, how many particles or how many substrates it is acting upon, that number is called as the turnover number or the enzyme efficiency. A very important parameter when we look at the industry. So typically the turnover number can vary from 10 to the power 2 to 10 to the power 3 molecules per second, which means one enzyme gives me or acts upon 10 to the power 2 to 10 to the power 3 molecules every second it is acting upon. This could be a regular turnover number, but then we have some enzymes which have very high turnover numbers. For example, sucrase is having a turnover number of 10 to the power 4. Or we have the fastest enzyme, in fact, is carbonic anhydrase, which is having a turnover number of 36 million in a second. Or we have catalase, which has a turnover number of 5 million in a second. So in 1 second, they are able to act upon that many molecules and convert them into products. The next property of an enzyme is the sensitivity. So they are highly sensitive to various environmental factors such as pH or changes in temperature or the presence of inhibitors. So they work well in a narrow range of conditions which we call as the optimum conditions. Any movement from the optimum conditions can hamper their action or can hamper their function. We also have a very important property amongst enzymes, that is specificity. So enzymes are highly specific, but the level of specificity or the degree of specificity varies. That under that we have 4 different types. The first one is absolute specificity. Those enzymes which catalyze the reaction, those which are the fussy enzymes, which are catalyzing the reaction of only one substrate, those are called as absolute specific enzymes, or that property is called as absolute specificity. Example is urease. Urease cannot act on any other substrate other than urea. They have to have urea to work. So they don't have any other substrate, hence their absolute dedication for one substrate. That is why they are called as absolute specificity enzymes. Group specificity enzymes are those which can act upon a related group of substrates, a closely related group of substrates. For example, hexokinase. Hexokinase can catalyze the reaction of any hexose sugar. Earlier I had shown you the catalysis of glucose, but it can act on any other hexose sugar. As long as the sugar has 6 carbon atoms and a particular structure, it can act upon it. So the group specific enzymes are those which are able to catalyze the reaction of a related group of compounds. Then we have stereospecificity or stereospecific enzymes, which are enzymes that are catalyzing the reaction of only one stereoisomer. Now, this is the case with most enzymes in our biological systems. They can catalyze the reaction of only either the L isomer or the D isomer. For example, lactate dehydrogenase can catalyze one of the lactate dehydrogenase can catalyze only the oxidation of one of the isomers, that is L lactate, but not D lactate. So the stereospecificity is a property that is seen in most of the enzymes that are found naturally in the living systems. And the last type of specificity is low specificity. These are enzymes which are not that specific. As long as they have a particular bond or a particular linkage, they are able to show their action. They are able to perform their work. Example is protease or lipase, which are enzymes that require only a particular linkage. For example, lipase requires only ester linkage. It doesn't matter whether the ester is whether the lipid that we have in a question here is very big lipid, does it have glycerol, does it have a long chain alcohol, nothing. As long as there is an ester linkage, lipase is able to act upon it and convert it into fatty acid and alcohol. So where the particular linkage alone is looked for, such type of enzyme specificity is called as low specificity enzyme. So these are the 4 types: absolute, group, stereo and low specificity. We also have enzymes which don't work alone. They work in combination with other compounds. So some of the enzymes, or you can say a majority of the enzymes, cannot work alone. Their catalytic activity depends upon certain other smaller molecules. So though they have a protein structure, I told you earlier that most of the enzymes are proteinaceous, though they have a particular protein conformation, they cannot fully function unless they are combined with certain smaller molecules. These molecules are called as cofactors. So cofactors can be divided into 2 groups. There could be metal ion cofactors such as iron, manganese, magnesium, zinc. So we have many enzymes which combine with such metal ions and only then they can function. Or we can even have the cofactor being an organic molecule, and in that case the cofactor is now called as a coenzyme. So we can either have metal ion cofactors or we can have coenzymes. Coenzymes are organic cofactors. What do these include? This can include NAD, NADP, FMN, FAD. These are all reducing equivalents which we will be talking about in the later video lectures. But all of these are examples of coenzymes because they are organic molecules which are helping in the enzyme's function. Now a coenzyme or a cofactor, generally we can call it as a cofactor, when it combines with the other part of the enzyme, that part of the enzyme is called as an apoenzyme. Apoenzyme is the enzyme without its cofactor. So when the apoenzyme combines with the cofactor, we get the fully functional enzyme which is called as the holoenzyme. Holoenzyme is the complete enzyme, the whole enzyme, which is the functional enzyme. So the apoenzyme along with the cofactor gives us the holoenzyme. So these are some of the things that we have studied today. We have spoken about the properties of enzyme. We have looked into what is the nomenclature and classification of enzymes. In the next video lectures, we will be moving on to how an enzyme binds, what are the different factors that help in binding, and the regulation of enzymes. I hope this video lecture has been useful to you all. Thank you and see you in the next lecture.